What's up, everybody? Back at 'em.
Yes, sir.
Got Eddie over here, back from a long trip from Mexico.
Oh, good Lord,
Relatively
yes.
long,
My brain's still 3 hours behind.
Yeah, that happens. It'll catch up.
But we're here. I made it.
Cool. So today we have Alex. Alex and I have been speaking for a couple months now. Can you introduce yourself a little bit? Like, tell me who you are. Tell our listeners who you are.
Yeah, my name's Alex. I'm here because my brother Andy, he's 31. He passed away. He would have been 32 this year. I got linked up with Austin through a friend of a friend, basically. And I'm just here to share my story and grief and what it's like to be a sibling and just live the life, you know.
Well, sorry for your loss, man,
Yeah,
but we're glad you're here to share. Jeez. We are glad you are here to share the story. See? 3 hours behind. I'll catch up eventually.
Muddled mouth. Okay. So I understand that it was like relatively recent, right? Like this
January
still
17th.
pretty fresh. Yeah.
About 6 months.
Yeah. Okay. So can you tell me a little bit about like how that occurred? Like how did he pass?
Basically, he was in rehab for, 60 days or so, clean, went from Orlando rehab to Daytona. He was going to get set up through the VA with an apartment complex they were going to help pay for. But his buddy and him that were in rehab, they were both sober and good. They got put up in a hotel basically through their own money. And in the meantime of waiting for about a week or two, which is part of the problem we've talked about before, is waiting and waiting. Mm-hmm. He just relapsed basically. And it's laced with fentanyl now, and then all kinds of stuff. Yeah. That's pretty much what happened. So, zero tolerance after you get out of rehab.
Right.
Do your usual dose or even like a small dose. You never know. And
so. Was he alone, I assume?
He was with his friend. They went to go get food at a hotel. They left the hotel, came back. They came back. He went to the room. Andy went to go to the gas station to get some, something. And that's where he got it probably. And then, he was alone, went in the bathroom while the guy was in the room, and then was just in the bathroom for a while. It's usually where he does it. So.
Yeah.
His friend find him?
His friend found him. It was just not only too late, but he didn't have any Narcan on him, and like no one usually does, especially when you're out of rehab, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. They should give you Narcan as you go. But anyway.
Some do.
Some do. I didn't know that.
Some do, yeah. I mean, that's like when you're at the highest risk of an overdose. Yeah. I mean, out of an institution or rehab, like any extended period of time of abstinence, I mean, I think like people often have the idea that like after that period of time of abstinence, like somebody goes back to using like the amounts that they were using before. And I think like for the most part, like speaking from experience, like kind of aware that your tolerance is down. Like it's not, I think most people tend to try to be careful about it, but with the way like the nature of the drug supply today and like fentanyl and like you said, like there's tons of fentanyl analogs and like other synthetic opioids that are popping up, especially recently. There's like, it's really hard to be safe about it. Like even if you take half the dose, quarter of the dose that you usually were.
Yeah, you just don't know what you're getting these days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
or what's and what, like people go out, like somebody will like split a cap, like they'll split a cap with somebody else and maybe somebody uses like 3/4 of the cap and is fine. And then that other person uses like a quarter, but just the minute amounts of something so potent like fentanyl or any of the synthetics, like the difference in it might be just a few grains and like a hot spot or whatever in the cap,
Even in active addiction, it was like that. I remember people overdosing on half of what I would do, know, and I was a monster. I was doing 3-4 caps at a time, and then I'd have people that would overdose off a half of one. Yeah, on the same
with like a relatively similar tolerance and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you they use every day and stuff like that, and I'd be blasting off with 3 or 4 caps. They'd do one, and that'd be the end of them. I could think of one very in particular person. He called me up one day, wanted to go get some. Hey, I got some money. Let's go. I'll break you off. It was one of those things. We did it. I think he broke me off with 2 caps. He went home, did his own thing, and within 2 hours of him leaving me, he was dead. Yeah. And I did the same exact batch. Right. So
It's hard to know. I mean, you can't possibly cut it evenly, you know. You can
Right.
put it in a coffee grinder. It doesn't matter what you do. That's the importance of not using alone, you know. Like, you can say, like, you can't use safely, and, like, you, in that sense, like, you can't guarantee, like, not having an overdose. But, you know, when you have somebody there that has naloxone, like, it sucks because, like, it's a totally preventable thing, but it happens so often. So how did you guys find out?
My parents found out through a Ring doorbell they installed in their house up in like Daytona or Ormond Beach. They live down here with me, similar cities. They just installed the doorbell, and the cops basically came up to it, and when that happens, you get an alert on your phone, I guess. That's how they found out. Then they immediately called me. I was at a kind of like a little photo shoot that I set up for my soccer. I coach soccer for kids. So I was trying to get some shots done of myself so I could put on my Instagram and stuff. I was literally finishing and paying the guy, and I got like 6 or 7 missed calls from my parents, which never happens, and that's pretty much how I found out. So I drove from like North Miami or Miami Shores to Pembroke Pines, which is like 30 minutes. And then we drove 3.5 hours north to Daytona or Ormond.
Right.
At like 10 o'clock at night.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's rough, dude.
Yeah.
They, like, communicate through the Ring camera, like, with the police
I think so. Yeah, I think the
officers?
cops pretty much told just real simple, like that we found your son. Nothing too, detailed, I guess. But they were a wreck. They called me. I was a wreck.
Yeah.
31. I'm 30. My brother's like 18 months older than me.
Right.
My only big brother. So, but yeah, I mean, that's how we found out. We always kind of knew. You always kind of think in the back of your head, the very bottom, like this might happen one day. But when it happens, you just don't. You're like, it's almost like your physiology changes. Like when you find out, like, I don't know. It's almost like you stood up too fast mixed with like you just woke up from a nap. You don't feel human. You feel like you're in a dream. It's really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I couldn't even
exactly
cry,
what you're
actually. I was just
saying.
like mad, but then I could cry eventually. But
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The different stages of
Yeah, it's
grieving.
really weird, yeah.
Yeah, that can take some time. So before we like go on to kind of like after that experience, like, and it may be kind of weird because it's not your own, but like unfortunately he's not here to speak about it. Can you tell me a little bit about like leading up to that? Like what was his like history of substance use? Like do you like to the extent that like
Absolutely.
where things kind of started?
I think, to be honest, I can give you a pretty good nutshell, like start to finish. Like I think that he was kind of bullied a little bit when, elementary, middle school. And by then it's kind of too late, I always like to say, because your brain starts to form and solidify what reality is, how people treat you.
Yeah.
He gets to high school, it's a little too late by then. Starts smoking weed, drinking a little bit, not much, just kind of your average amount. This is back in like the middle 2000s.
Okay.
And basically starts kind of dabbling in heroin a little bit. I would follow him around everywhere. We smoked weed and we learned. Like, he taught me things. I did it with him once or twice. And
dope. Like, did he start with heroin, or was he into like prescription pills first?
no,
or?
I think it was he might have gotten his hands on a prescription or two, but he never had his own at that age, at like 15, 16, 17.
Yeah.
Kind of experimented with it, joins the army at 18, leaves, gets clean, leaves. Basically a month or two into boot camp, gets mono really bad. For some reason had to have surgery on his spleen or something like that. There was some scar tissue. They leave him in medical for another month or two, pump him full of Oxycontin. This is back in like 09.
Yeah.
Pumps him full, sends him home with a bunch of prescription pills, and then those wear off eventually, and then he starts turning to obviously street drugs or heroin, basically.
Right.
That's pretty much, and that was back in like 2000 and probably 10 or 11. I joined the Marines at that time, so I didn't really know the extent of what was happening. Because in high school, he wasn't really using heroin much. It was just like every once in a while.
Right. He didn't have like a habit, and
not that I know of.
Would you say like that was probably where like after that, the medical procedure and getting prescribed stuff, like that's where like things became like consistent and like problematic for him?
I think so, but I think that it's kind of like a two-part thing. Like opiates affect people differently, and I would say too, like in different amounts. Like
Mm-hmm.
when I did it,
For sure.
I hurled, but I've also done a smaller dose, and you feel relaxed. So I get it, and I think most people would understand that if they have a broken knee or something. So I think that it became a problem in high school. He realized what it was. But when you're older, like 20 years old or something, and you got some actual physical pain, like a scar tissue inside your gut or something that most people can't see or believe you most of the time, that's part of the problem. Doctors don't believe you, nurses don't believe you. I'm sure you know all about that. And then it's, again, too late. Like, and they know how it makes them feel. And it kind of goes back to the very beginning. Like, you're kind of getting bullied a little bit by some doctors and some nurses. Not all of them. Some are really good. And the way they treat you is just, and you're like, well, fuck this. Like, I'm just going to go use, like, fuck you. It's the same thing. So it's just an endless cycle. Kind of starts back where it ends and ends back where it starts. But
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I identify with that deeply.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've talked about it a little bit, but like, I had dabbled with like pretty much like exactly in line with, what you're saying his story is. I had dabbled with like prescription opiates like blues and stuff. I never like fucked with heroin like when I was in high school or anything. But like I knew what the effect it had on me and that I liked it and all that. But never like, was a habitual user, like never had any kind of habit. Would just like, it was something that was there occasionally. And then like the end of my sophomore year at Georgia Southern, which is like 2011, 2010, something like that. I had like a routine dental procedure, like a root canal that caused like some pretty serious nerve damage and resulted in trigeminal neuralgia, which, I don't know if I've talked about it on the show before. Maybe Judy's nodding.
I think you have.
Yeah, but it was gnarly, and like if you Google the suicide disease, like that's what comes up. Like I that's why I say like I probably wouldn't be alive if it weren't for opiates. But I dealt with a lot of bullying and stigma from doctors too. Like, but that's also how like I got into like real serious problematic substance use, and like it's a hard line to toe and like to say what's right and what's wrong, because a lot of the reason that I sought out illicit opiates, whether that was heroin or like getting prescription pills that weren't mine, even though I was being prescribed stuff, was because of the fact that like doctors often wouldn't believe me or would very much like undermanage the pain. It sends you seeking elsewhere, like when I was still, I had no idea what it was, what was going on. I just knew that I was in constant excruciating pain. And I got all the stuff done in Statesboro where I was in school, and then went back home for the summer, saw an oral surgeon up there. He was like, yeah, we'll just take the tooth out. So they extracted the tooth because he's like, I don't know, maybe there's a break that's causing you pain or something. And I was still hurting, and he basically told me, you're drug seeking, go home. Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And like I wasn't in that time, and so I ended up drug seeking because like I was trying to get any way of getting out of pain. And then, I eventually like found doctors here and there that were helpful. Sometimes that would last, sometimes it wouldn't. But it's not an uncommon story for people, unfortunately. So was that like, do you know if that was like an ongoing chronic pain thing, or it just kind of like really kicked it off?
Well, I would say the pain thing started after the military for sure.
Yeah.
But after that, I would say it's kind of one of those situations. It's a gray area where it's like, I'm his brother. I believe anything he says.
Sure.
I mean, if he says something's hurting, I get why he's going to use. And I ended up loving him while he was using, because I saw different videos on TED Talks and all kinds of things of like basically the way we treat people that are addicted to anything or suffering from addiction. People say nowadays more is wrong. Like, you just have to embrace them, because people that are not in that life can pretty much guarantee that they don't understand, and that's why they look at it with such like a arm folding mentality. They're just like, well, what the fuck? You're just a junkie or this or that. And they have those terms now in doctors' offices and ERs, like treat them and street them, and it's just, it's not like, you're just human beings at the end of the day, and they pretty much just treat you like a different, not only a different class, but like a different species, in my opinion. If I've seen it firsthand, or secondhand, I guess, from Andy. But yeah, I would say that's when it started.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely viewed as like a moral failing kind of deal, and then like that feeds into the whole thing, right? Like if you're treated in that way, like there's self-fulfilling prophecy aspects to that whole thing. You're treated like a drug addict, but you know, people assume or make statements about you. You kind of tend to start acting that way, you know, you believe the things that are told about you, and that can swing the other way too, you know. It's just unfortunate that when it comes to people who use drugs, like that's the thing that's attached to them. Yeah. So that was, you said like 2009? I would say he got out of the military around 2009. Yeah, I went in the Marines around 2010, and I didn't really see much of him because I left. He came home, I left. Yeah. He pretty much got married at 20 or something like that. Moved out, started, and they were normal at that point. They seemed very healthy. I didn't know that they were popping pills or anything. Yeah. And then I was in boot camp, and Marine boot camp, it's different. Like, we don't have our phones. We just have letters. So he never wrote me a letter. I never got anything for 13 weeks. I didn't know. I didn't understand until I got out. I understand more and more. Sure. And it just shattered me, because that was when I was like, 20, like 18, 19 years old. I finally understood this, and it just shattered me completely, because I didn't know how to help. I was just like, what do I do? Like, what do you do? What does anyone do? I feel like my brother has cancer or something. Like, what do I do? Right. Who can help my brother,
How long, coming out of the military, how long was his use?
Pretty much nonstop, because he came out when he was like, 18, 19 or so, and he pretty much used on and off, in and out of rehab for 10 or so years until he was, 31. He just turned 32. He would have been 32 this year on July 9th, 1990. So, yeah.
So, just to sidetrack real quick, I don't know if I knew that you were in the Marines.
Yeah.
Did you serve overseas?
No.
No? Okay. Did you see any of that, like, with the people that you served with? Like, did you see any, like, substance use? Because, like, I had friends that joined the military, and I heard, like, some wild stories. Most of it took place, like, in Afghanistan. I have quite a handful of friends that came back from Afghanistan with severe habits and ended up overdosing and dying. Yeah. Did you see any of that, like, in your...
Not much. I've heard about it from people in Afghanistan, especially because there's like poppy fields over there and stuff, and that's when they would take it and steal it or use it, come back with an addiction. But for me, I was more on the mainland. I was in Hawaii. I was in logistics, so all my friends would go away. It was fun, but all my friends would deploy to the Philippines, Korea, and Afghanistan. And even though I wanted to go, I couldn't, because I was in like a logistics battalion. But I didn't see much of it. I saw a lot of alcoholism for sure. Yeah, I was really prominent, like more than you can imagine, and
because it's accepted.
Yeah, and if you're not in that, then you're kind of like normal or regular, and you're also overlooked because you're overworked, and they treat you like shit. In the Marines, they treat you like shit, I think. And so people like me, I was 18, 19, making like $2,000 a month, like hating my life, like working however many hours they said. There was no set time, and I was very suicidal, very depressed, and there was just no outreach for a lot of that stuff either. So when you look at the whole thing, drugs or no drugs, like there's just this weird disconnect of like money and like
humanity,
welfare.
Yeah. There's no humanity. It's all about the dollar. Nobody cares.
Yep.
Even getting into treatment, if you don't have money, you're not going somewhere nice. If you do find, you're going to go to a mental institution, or you're going to go to a state-run facility, and they are not cushy. They're not easy.
Most of them are not, which always blows my mind, because, I'm not going to name names or anything, but like the amount of funding that some of these public detoxes and treatment centers get versus like, it's not even just like the facility, but just like the treatment of the people who come in, like redo your facilities and like have new painted walls and new rooms and stuff, which some of them do, and they like to use that as like a point of, you know, we did this. But like at the end of the day, like I'd rather have like a real shitty facility and be treated like a human being. And unfortunately, like if you don't got that PPO, you know, that's you're
those
not.
people hate their jobs, man.
Yeah.
They hate them.
Yeah.
You know, they're not. Yeah.
No.
Well, even the paid ones. Even the paid ones. Not everyone there is happy to be there. I mean, I worked in treatment, so I kind of understand it because it's rough, especially if you're a tech. You know, it's like babysitting adults. You know,
Certainly can be.
Yeah. It was rough, but I also worked at a facility that, we'll just say, it didn't even last a year. It was pretty crooked.
Yeah.
It was the first time that I worked in treatment and the last. I won't do it again.
Yeah,
Not for
have
me.
a lot of interest in working in treatment, but that's common. Like pop-ups, treatment centers in Palm Beach County and Broward, like pop up and shut down. In a matter
Yeah,
of
I can
a
go
year,
into
so.
more detail on that, but I'm pretty sure that the people that ran it were also drug dealers. I've overheard some conversations, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure he's talking about cocaine right now.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
it was doomed to fail from the start.
So what did your substance use look like? Like you mentioned like in high school, like smoking weed, like maybe doing heroin a couple of times.
Yeah, I would say it started more with like weed, alcohol,
Yeah.
pornography, that kind of stuff, and then just kind of going pretty much on and off of that my whole life.
Yeah.
That was pretty much the extent of it. You know,
You never hit like a problematic, like
No.
yeah, like a normal.
Didn't. Yeah, I didn't.
person.
I mean, I did try a couple opiates with my brother and had a pretty bad time. But
Really?
I did it with him because he, you know, I trusted him, and he wasn't trying to get me to get hooked on it or something.
Sure.
He was just like, hey, let's do this. It'll be fun. Or,
So you never really followed in his footsteps as far as the drug use?
I would say no, yes and no. Like I did heroin a couple times, yeah, but at the same time, I
Didn't go as deep.
Yeah, because I would get the immediate reaction of like vomiting and nausea and headache, and I would literally black out, and then the next day I would be like, what? Why would I do this? Like,
Right.
I can't imagine doing. Like, but that was just me. But but
Yeah.
I was still on a different level, like extremely sad, like more concerned about Andy than my own like bad night. I was just like, how is Andy going to get out of this? You know, how is he stuck in this loop so deep that I can't even stay in the loop with him? I mean, I want to be in there with him, but I can't.
Yeah.
I have to help him.
So were you seeing like in high school, like before, like it was like this thing, like where it became this big issue and you had a habit, like you mentioned, like it was just every now and then or what, like, did you see a problem coming? Like, did you see that coming down the pike, or was it just this normal thing at that time?
I kind of saw it coming a little bit, not too bad, but yeah, I would just say a lot of people in the world, they don't like school, or they're too good at school, so that's boring for them, and they also hang out with the wrong crowd, and you also have like the bullying aspect of it, and so which the more I learned about this and like studying neuroscience and stuff, like your brain sort of kind of stops maturing in certain ways emotionally if you start doing, let's say, meth or a heavier drug at a young age, and that doesn't mean that you're like dumb or anything. It just means that like you never really learn how to cope emotionally. And that I think is a very under talked about thing, because when you get fast forward to 20s and 30-year-olds, if your big life decisions are happening and you're not able to cope, if a nurse is mean to you in detox or whatever, you can leave AMA, or there's all kinds of shit that can happen, you know? I mean, and to go kind of back to when he overdosed, he actually was in the rehab for like, you know, 2 months. He kind of had one of those days, and he somehow, we think the only way we could possibly imagine is he went out of the facility, because you can, for like 30 minutes, you sign a book, got heroin, goes back up, overdoses on like probably like 2 weeks before he dies. The only way someone found him was because a nurse was coming to tell him he tested positive for COVID. Narcans him twice, saves his life, paddles him, saves his life.
Jeez.
So this happened prior to
the death.
In treatment. Oh
yeah. So and that's why you said something about like whether you're high risk or not, they'll send you home with Narcan. They deemed him really high risk. they told him to go to a psych facility or something like that. He just didn't want to go. And maybe that's why they didn't send him home with anything. I don't know. But he basically left AMA.
Yeah, that's nuts. Nuts. Yeah. Did they discharge him after that overdose? Like, was that like,
I don't think they did.
You need a higher level of care, or did they like give him the option to continue treatment?
I think they kind of sort of discharged him. They wanted him to get a higher level care. Like they took his phone from him. They did things like that. And the way he would speak to us in the moments that he had his phone was like, fuck these people. Like, they're not here to help me. And kind of like the whole pain thing. Like, we don't know what to believe, but I'm going to believe my brother. I mean, and I'm not saying he's right all the time. I'm not right all the time either, but I don't know what's going on in that facility. And all I have is my brother's voice that I've heard for 30 years. So
yeah,
I know, who am I going to believe? Like,
did he go somewhere down here in you don't have to name the facility?
No,
but
he never went down here. He was more in the Daytona Beach area,
Okay.
and that VA is connected to Orlando, which is their big VA. So that's where they would bust them or whatever. They would detox somewhere, go to Orlando for 2-3 months usually, sometimes longer, but usually 2 or 3 months. 2 months, I think, other than a time in Augusta, Georgia. He graduated from that one, but basically 2 months was the longest he ever did. Usually he would go for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in AMA. But yeah.
So you mentioned the going back to talking about like in terms of drug use, like earlier on, like before the brain's fully developed, and like we've gotten a lot of information in recent years about the brain not being fully developed, especially in males, until like 27. Yep. And that, I agree, is like something that is not discussed enough, especially like when it comes to drug education in general. For the most part, like the United States' approach to drug education has been like, just say no, dare, like, giving you a lot of scare tactics and like saying don't do this, which just, I don't know, didn't work for me.
Right, tell me not to do something. I'll be like, why not?
Right.
Let me find out why I shouldn't do this by doing it.
Yeah. But there is a lot, there's different points in development, like early childhood, where there's like a large growth of gray matter, and neuroplasticity is like more significant in those times. And then recently they've found like another point, I think at like 11, like early adolescence, like 11 to 14 or 15, where there's another huge spike in excess gray matter and neuroplasticity. And that's a big point as far as like when you're using drugs in these times, because like your brain is developing, like the effect of it is more significant than if you're like an adult using a substance, just because those are the learned things. Like that neuroplasticity can be a positive, if you're using, like you're learning new things, you're like, obviously like in that time, like your ability to develop language is a lot bigger or more significant. But also like if you're developing quote unquote bad habits, or more accurately, like bad coping skills. Those are the things that like set in more so because like of that moldability. You're going to have like more of a response to like a high level of dopamine. And then because your brain is so apt to learn in that time, those are the things that it attaches to. And then it's like, it's learned as that, like I've learned to use this substance or that substance to cope with this problem or that problem. And that's definitely not talked about. Talk about it in the Safety First drug education program that we're doing right now for like high school students. But that's still super new. It's not deployed nationwide by any means. Hopefully at some point it will be. Florida has like a new, quote unquote, new drug education program. I don't remember the name of it.
What, for schools?
Yeah, DeSantis' wife championed it. It's basically just say no repackaged. Like, it literally is just say no repackaged. It's not a lot different. And
because that worked great the first time.
Right. I mean, there's a reason, like, the feds pulled funding from DARE, So I imagine our drug education was probably pretty similar. You went to school in Forsyth County. I went to school in Gwinnett County. Two very similar school districts in terms of like the way Georgia schools are. Gwinnett and Forsyth were probably the two counties keeping Georgia from being like 50th in the nation as far as ranking in education. But we were always like edging like I think like 47 or something like that. But those two counties were really good as far as education goes, but heavily utilized DARE. Did you have DARE? Did you go through DARE?
I think so, yeah.
Do you like have any recollection of it? No,
not really.
That's interesting. Because for me, I remember everything about DARE. It did nothing but pique my interest in drugs.
I only remember singing stupid songs. We would do it during like music class.
You did DARE in music class?
Yeah, our music teacher did it. Like
we had cops come in our school.
Oh, they would come from time to time, but they wasn't like every time we did DARE. Like we would go to the music class and she would play the piano and we'd sing these stupid songs. And from time to time, you know, we'd have like a cop come in with the briefcase, open up the briefcase and it's got all the different drugs on it, you know, that kind of thing. And I don't know, that's all I remember from it. But yeah, I feel like when you talk about DARE and then I talk about DARE, they did it differently. There was no unison in it, you know? So I feel like they were just flying off the hip. Yeah. My music teacher wrote some songs. We'll sing these every time. They were terrible.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a...
Popping pills you don't need. They're a filthy, filthy need. Yeah.
That's terrible. That's awful.
I don't know how I still remember that, but I do.
No, we had like cops, like two cops come into the school to teach class like weekly or twice a week or something like that to teach DARE. And it just, I mean, they use like scare tactics or what they thought were like scare tactics. For me, like it just really piqued my interest in drugs. I never thought once about drugs until DARE. And then, like, I went into 6th grade. I say it all the time. I went into 6th grade, had access to the library, like, free access, and I was checking out every
memorized every single medical book ever.
Well, all the drugs.
The walking textbook, this guy.
They made it sound really interesting and nothing that, like, their intentions were effective for me and a lot of my friends. I'm sure for a lot of people, like, it scared them away from drugs and, you know, did whatever it was that they intended. But I think like as a whole, like it's just not effective because kids are smart, right? Like you can give them like factual information and allow them to use like their own critical thinking skills to like make wiser decisions. But instead, like we've always kind of just given them information that wasn't fact. And then when they find out that, well, that was BS, then like, what do we do next? Like, when I didn't rob my mom the following day after smoking weed, like, what's going to go through my mind? But, like, what else did they lie about, you know? So you don't remember much about, like, your drug education. Would you say your drug education, quote unquote, was, like, through peers and or your brother?
Yeah, just a lot of, like, no. You know? But people, especially nowadays, I think, from our generation, too, like, we just want to know why. Not just for drugs, but like for anything. Like, why do I need to take this math class? Why do I not take opiates? Why do I need to go to college? Why don't I need to go to college? Like, we just want to know why. And we want to not just know, but we want to see the data, I think. I do it anyway, because then you can believe it more. I just think this generation is probably one of the most educated generations, but you can't just keep saying no to certain things. Like, you know, it's just, it just doesn't work.
I think in a lot of ways we probably are most educated. Yeah. Sometimes, like, I question that, but, you know.
Yeah, it depends on where that information comes from and what the motive behind giving you that information is, you know.
There's a lot of information on TikTok that's, like, way out there that scares me that kids are getting. Yeah. But then, you know, there is access to it. Like, that's another part of Safety First. Like, the way, like, the breakdown is like, it's the first one is, like, what is a drug? You know, and like it really uses a broad definition, like more or less anything that you put in your body that changes like the way your mind or your body is functioning physiologically. So in that definition, you know, like water's a drug, obviously caffeine and nicotine's a drug, but like, yeah, like if you're dehydrated or your blood sugar's low and you drink water or like eat something that has sugar, you're going to feel different. So it takes that broad approach. which I think like is helpful in getting less of a really like stigmatized, like putting this in a like a corner over here that this is what it is and everything else is cool, or I don't know. But then it like breaks it down into like what is harm reduction, how drugs work, which really goes into like using drugs like when you're younger, like how that affects the brain and stuff. And then it breaks down like each classification of drug like each week. But most of the lessons involve like how do we assess like a legitimate resource, like how do you know that your information is like coming from like a legitimate place and factual
and not biased.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, which I think is important,
Yeah.
like because there is so much information out there. Yeah. So what did the following like weeks look like for you guys after your brother passed?
I would say first week, couldn't really see Andy's body till the end of the week, so we had to wait like 3 or 4 days or so. That was pretty rough. Just a lot of just like the deepest level of crying that you can possibly give out, you know, like while you're alive. That's the only way I can describe it. I would say you just feel alone. You feel all those types of alone feelings, like no one knows what this is like. Especially anyone that you could see or throw a rock at, no one knows. But when you read online and stuff, like opiate deaths are up like 100,000 this year, 130 next year, like it just keeps going. So we're just one of hundreds of thousands. So we felt alone, but we also felt a lot of just anger. We wanted to know who dealt him the drugs. I wanted to personally quit my job and just move away to another country or something. I just wanted to give up my whole life and just move, which I've done a little bit of research on lately, and people just don't know why the human brain does that. It's like the fight or flight thing with grieving.
Yeah.
But I would say just a lot of alone feelings. Like you just feel like nothing else matters. I could lose my job tomorrow. I don't give a shit. Like
Right.
This is as bad as it gets for me because I don't have kids. This is as bad as my life gets. So yeah, that was kind of what it was like, I think.
Had you known anybody who had passed in a similar way? Did you guys have family friends at all that had gone through anything like that?
Andy did. Andy knew about 2 or 3 people or so throughout his life that were pretty close to him.
Yeah, I usually do if you're in that life.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm the last one standing. I'm the only one that made it out. There's a couple that might still be alive, but I don't know where they are these days. But a lot of the people that I ran with closely, they're gone, man.
Mm-hmm.
None of them made it.
Yeah.
So usually if you're in that life, you're going to know some.
Yeah.
For sure.
I didn't know anybody who died for a long time, man. Like every now and then there'd be somebody on the periphery like you'd hear about, like, but that was when heroin was heroin.
Yeah, no, the more fentanyl became
It exploded. Like
prevalent.
I lost like 26 people in a year. Like it was
when I started, it wasn't like that, you know. But once you started hearing that name fentanyl, and then suddenly your buddy dies, and then you hear about a buddy's buddy who dies, and then the cycle begins, and then it starts getting closer and closer to you.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, did you guys find like what did they investigate who sold it? Like
No.
What was that desire like, and do you feel like that would have resolved any of the feelings that you were like experiencing?
I think it would just resolve one small sliver of the pie for me and maybe my family too. I can speak for them a little bit about that. I've personally followed Andy a couple times to buy it, like watch him buy it, taking pictures of plates and giving them to the cops, but they would literally just tell, I mean, they're going to do their best, they told me, but they would say as soon as we catch this one, another one pops up, kind of thing, and which made me, frustrated, but I was like, well, whatever, get this one off the street at least, like, and it's different, like, it's really no different than someone like walking up to your parents' house, opening the door and just shooting them in the head. Like you just want to find that person. I don't care if you're just the dealer's dealer. Like I want to find you and I want to see you go to jail, but I still have to go grieve, but I'm personally I'm a forgiving person, but with something like that, like, I mean, I don't want to get too deep with this, but like, I don't care what happens to them. Like if they're locked away for life, it's none of my business. Like you took my brother away from my life. So I'm not trying to do the eye for an eye thing, and I get that people that don't have a lot of things in life sell drugs. That's fine. I get it. But, when you're taking people's lives, like it's just a different, you know, because most often than not, they have a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or, you know, so come on, like they know what they're doing. Like, I don't know how they sleep at night, but they need money and I get it. So, yeah.
So this is like a very, like touchy subject and a very like hot topic. And everybody has the right to feel that the way that they feel about it, especially when they're grieving and the grief is so fresh. But we like to talk about touchy topics on here because I think it's important conversations to have. And I think everybody likes to shy away from some of those topics, especially like in cases where it's so personal. Would you, had they been caught, have preferred that they were arrested for dealing a controlled substance or preferred that they were arrested and charged with something like manslaughter?
I would say both. I just think, you know, like it's kind of a thing like with guns too. Like you sell guns, someone's gonna take it and go do something. It's weird. It's a gray area. I think it always will be a gray area. But when it affects you with grief, you know, like I think it's a little different if it's kind of touchy with doctors. Let's say a doctor prescribes a bottle of pills, correct dosage. Person takes it home, takes the wrong dosage or something like that. But when you're not a medical professional and you're actively doing something like this with 2 to 3 grains of fentanyl can absorb into your skin and drop you.
Now that's not true.
That's not true? Okay.
No.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I just thought that
it's
was true.
super perpetuated.
No, that's okay.
Everybody says that. And like, I'm glad that you said it. I don't know if we talked about it on here before.
I don't think we have. No.
But it's like an important myth to dispel.
That's
and
good,
I don't want to get away from this.
Yeah.
Really?
That fentanyl, if it touches your skin, it'll kill you.
You haven't heard that?
No.
Oh, dude, there's articles. There's
videos. I mean,
there's videos of cops overdosing from fentanyl, from touching it. I could go on about this, but I don't want to like get too far. But so the reason that myth specifically is very dangerous is because that strongly discourages anybody from helping somebody if they come across somebody that's overdosed. You know, like if they think that they're going to put their own life at risk by being around or touching fentanyl, then they're far less likely to actually do anything other than just like call 911. It's a highly perpetuated myth specifically by first responders, law enforcement, EMTs. So there's a lot of videos of police officers Narcaning themselves. Just going to say flat out, if you can Narcan yourself, you don't need to be Narcaned.
What?
Yeah.
Who's putting these videos together?
Police officers and departments. The San Diego Police Department back in like January or February put out a video.
It's supposed to be like a PSA or something?
Yeah, it was showing like a police officer who was like handling controlled substance and without gloves, which is against protocol. But regardless, he goes out within a couple seconds of handling it. Mind you, like that's as quick as somebody if they injected it directly into their vein. You wouldn't go out that fast if you sniffed it. You know, like things take time. So if it were to absorb through your skin, like it would obviously take time. He falls over like a tree. Like he literally like just like
I gotta look these videos up.
Yeah.
I gotta see this. I've never seen that before.
So in an overdose, like you're gonna crumble. Like you don't go straight over like that. He even said like in his testimony in this specific video, like he was like, I could feel myself like struggling to breathe. He was like fully conscious according to him. If there's one comforting thing to know, like when somebody experiences an overdose, is there's no pain.
No, it's like falling asleep.
It's literally being put under anesthesia. Yep. I mean, like, it's not like it. That's what it is. They're doing the same thing to you when you get put under anesthesia. You're just having something breathe for you.
I when it happened to me, I just nodded out. And then I woke up in an ambulance. I never felt anything. Never even knew it happened until I woke up and realized, something bad happened to me. And that's when they told me you overdosed. I'm like, what?
Most of the time, you're like, don't even believe that you overdosed.
Yeah, that was
3
me.
hours
I'm like,
could
are
have
you
passed,
serious?
5 minutes could have passed. Yeah. But where that myth comes from is a lot of people are aware that like there's fentanyl patches out there. Like I was prescribed fentanyl patches for years. The literature on a fentanyl patch, like it very clearly says it takes a couple hours for fentanyl to start absorbing through the skin, and it takes 24 to 48 hours for fentanyl to like reach stable blood plasma levels. And that's in something that was designed and formulated. Pharmaceutical companies spent like millions of dollars over a number of years to like formulate a matrix that would allow fentanyl to be absorbed that way. There's not an opiate that's so potent that like it absorbs through the skin. It's just like that's how like drug misinformation gets spread, you know. And I'm happy like you brought it up because I don't think we've talked about it on here, but there is so much. Now what is happening is people are experiencing, because they're being told this, especially police officers and EMTs, they're experiencing symptoms of a panic attack. There was a recent Facebook post that this chick made. It was circulating everywhere, where she picked up a $1 bill in a McDonald's bathroom.
Oh, I've heard about that.
Yeah, and she like brought it to the car, and her husband's like, it's just the whole way it pans out. Her husband's like kind of lecturing her about like, you don't pick up money anymore because there could be fentanyl on it. And within like that conversation, she starts experiencing symptoms. She wrote like this long thing about like, then she went to the hospital. Those symptoms were a panic attack because her husband's sitting there telling her you might overdose if you touch money, and she just touched money. What she didn't write about was that there were no drugs found in her system. Her blood O2 levels were like 99 to 100% when she got there. Like, she wasn't overdosing. She had a panic attack because you're getting these things told to you. And panic attacks can do like some crazy things to your body, man. Like, I thought I was dying.
Yeah, they suck.
For sure.
For sure. Your chest tightens up, hard to breathe, lightheadedness, all that stuff. Yeah, panic attacks they're no joke.
No,
especially if you get them bad. Yeah. I used to get them real mild, and then there was a period of time where they would hit me hard. Yeah, you know, I remember I was in high school. I could feel it coming, and I remember walking to the clinic or whatever, leaning up against the wall. Just sliding down the wall, trying to get there, lightheaded. They said when I walked in, I was pale and real flush and all that stuff, and couldn't breathe. Thought I was dying. Yeah, that was the first time I ever had like a bad one, like when it hit me like that. It happened to me in school, but yeah, they can be pretty brutal.
People often go to the hospital, especially their first panic attack.
For sure. I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know. I got my heart checked out, and I did all kinds of tests to see if there was something wrong, and the only thing that we can conclude is that I just had a bad panic attack or an anxiety attack or whatever it was that they told me at the time.
Right. So there's this dude, Chad Sabora, who like founded Rebel's sister agency. It's like the Rebel Recovery St. Louis or something like that. He put out a video like 3 years ago, something like around that time, where he had gotten illicit fentanyl off the streets, tested it in the video, showed like with a fentanyl test strip, like this is fentanyl, and just proceeded to like hold it in his hand for like 10 to 15 minutes and talk just to like be like, yo, like this doesn't happen, you know? But it's widely like thought that is something that happens. Okay. Or like that people can inhale it, like that it gets in the air, you know, like it's common.
This goes back to what we were saying before about where the information comes from.
Yeah. Well, when you're having literal police departments, like we look at as a society, I don't want to say we because I'm not going to identify with that myself, but as a society, we look at police departments putting out information as like the authority, and they've got to have valid information. They're the police department, right? But they don't always, you know. It's just one of those things.
Show me a peer-reviewed article that says that this is right.
Right. There's a lot of peer-reviewed articles on that subject now. But yeah, people have capitalized on it. Like you can buy latex gloves that like say like fentanyl proof on the box. It's not like this like rare myth by any means.
How have I never heard this?
I don't know,
before,
dude. I honestly don't know how you haven't heard of it.
Maybe I was out of the loop by the time this started happening.
But those are also the things that like further stigmatize drug users too. Like it in a way, like it puts them even more like they mess with this stuff that could harm me, even if like I don't do it. There's a lot of things that like as ideas like that really like seep into the way society treats people. But I digress. I'm glad that you mentioned that because it's a good thing to discuss. But on the thing, like I've had worked with one of the first people in Florida to catch a manslaughter charge for selling a substance that ended up killing somebody. I think he was actually the first person in Florida, and he's in prison. He'll be in prison for a long time. He's a drug user. He has a substance use disorder. Most of the people that catch those charges aren't making bank. They're struggling too. Can't tell you how many times I've helped somebody get dope or somebody helped me get dope. And if I died from the dope that they helped me get, I would have been real remiss to know that they faced consequences for it because I was making my decisions.
Yeah, that happened to me.
I know. Eddie, you want to share your story?
So I think I mentioned...
Before you say this isn't to say that you don't have the right to feel the way you feel. I didn't lose my brother. Like I just want to kind of like propose other points of view on it. You know? Okay, go on.
So I think I mentioned the guy that hit me up, said, I got some money, let's go. Broke me off. He went his way, I went mine. Well, within the next couple hours, he was dead. So his mom got a hold of the cell phone, and so we were texting back and forth about the whole thing. She wanted my head on a pike, and she would text me or call, usually a text, every couple of weeks, and to tell me how much pain she was in and how much she hated me, right? And get real nasty. I think she thought that my niece was my daughter. She would tell me things like, I hope she dies so you can feel my pain, things like that. Real brutal things that she used to say to me. Well, anyway, so about 3 months after his overdose, I had two detectives come to my house. They printed out my Facebook pictures, my profile picture, and they had all kinds of stuff on me. It blew my mind. I was not expecting it. I had just woken up. I walked outside to smoke a cigarette, and there's these two guys standing there talking to my dad. I had no idea why they were there. And then, they pulled me aside and pretty much told me that if I didn't give up the person that I got it from, that I was going to take the charge. And we were talking about a murder charge. So that very well could have happened to me. Obviously, I said, you know what? This is his name, and this is where it's at. I wasn't going to take the fall for that. You know what I mean? So it moved on. But yeah, that's a real thing, man. They showed up at my house ready to take me down for it because I was the one that got it for him. You know, even though if you read the text, it's like, it's just two drug addicts saying, hey, let's go make a run. But because I knew the guy, it was my connect, they wanted to press charges on me unless, I gave up that connect. But I mentioned his mom. It's funny. She's actually a supporter of mine now. When I got clean, and I don't know if you know anything about the 12-step program, one of the steps is to make amends with people that you hurt. She was the first one I made amends with. So she went from being somebody who hated me to somebody who she actually came to watch me pick up my 1 year medallion. When I made it to a year, she came to see me get that medallion. So that was pretty cool. So that's a little side note on that story. But yes, it's definitely a real thing, man. If you were to get dope for a friend and that friend died, you could very well catch a murder charge for that. For sure.
Not everywhere, but in Florida now and in a lot of other states. But you know, it's like one of those things, like we experience so much pain from the loss of somebody, and we really want somewhere to place blame. And like it just naturally, like as humans, like there's like the sense that it would somehow make us feel better. Most of the people involved in like the drug game, quote unquote, whether they're, you know, also people with a substance use disorder themselves, which is like, I would say a big majority, at least on the lower levels, or whether they're dealers that have had a huge lack of opportunities because a lot of different things that kind of permeate through our society and our institutions and always have. Not saying that makes it okay, but this is also the nature of our drug policy.
Yeah, it's the circumstances.
Yeah.
These guys don't even know what they're selling to people.
No, I mean, no.
Most of them anyway.
No, and like most people don't want their customers to die, you know, but it happens, unfortunately. And I mean, I'm personally a big advocate for legalize everything, because this shit doesn't happen if you do. I mean, like, do people have problems with alcohol? Absolutely. Do people like do stupid stuff and die in drunk driving accidents? Sure. But nobody's wondering if there's fentanyl in their bottle of vodka that they bought.
That's true.
You know? But I don't know. It's like, it's a hot topic, and it's an emotional topic
for sure.
Yeah, it's emotional. I think one connection I never thought I would make is, are you familiar with swatting?
Yes.
So yeah. There's a pretty good Netflix documentary on it. You should watch it.
You say squatting? Swatting.
Is it the one, what's the name of the documentary?
I forgot the name, but
I think I know what you're talking about. Like, don't trust the internet or something like that. I watched it recently.
I saw that name. I haven't watched it.
Kind of like the manslaughter topic. It's a different thing. Obviously, we're talking about drugs and we're talking about something else, but I like to make these kind of comparisons because it does give you a deeper perspective. So swatting is basically this kid that gets kind of a rush from, let's say me and you were playing video games online. I met you online. You're a jerk or you're being mean to me. And this guy I know has a Twitter account. I can look him up and say, hey, this guy's a dick. Go swat this guy's house. Basically, he will make a fake phone call pretending that he's you. Give the cops your address and say, hey, I just killed my dad. Like, I'm not happy with myself. Like, I'm not safe. I might kill myself and more people. The SWAT team shows up to your house thinking that you're some other person or something like that, or thinking that you did this crime that he just said you did. Are you following? It's kind of weird. Show up to your house with like M16s and everything, like ready to go as soon as you open the door. A lot of times, not all the time, but sometimes there was a couple famous cases where someone was shot. The innocent person that opened the door was shot. So it's like, who goes to jail in this situation? The guy that called you, or you're the one that called to pretend? So it's like, do we both go to jail? Like, who gets charged? Was it the cop? Is the cop shot because the cop was afraid? The cop thought you already had killed people with a gun, and maybe it's a cell phone, maybe it's a vape, maybe it's a gun, but like, that's another situation. It's just a little different, but it's like, who goes to jail? Does he get charged with manslaughter? Do we both get charged? He made the phone call. I didn't make the phone call, but I wanted to make the phone call, so it's just a different idea.
Well, in that specific case too, like there was the person like said, basically like dared him to swat him, but he was living in a different house. He gave him the wrong address. Yeah. The only thing I would say like distinguishes the two is the dude who was shot didn't seek out the guy to call him.
Yeah, for sure.
And like when I've experienced overdoses, I sought out the drugs, and like we know that that's a risk, but like
it was my choice.
There's no like right. I think personally, like when we keep doing the things that we do by criminalizing one end or another, like we just dig ourselves in a bigger hole. But that also doesn't like separate like the emotion that goes into it, and I fully understand that. Yeah. But it's an interesting thing to think about. Yeah. So we're at an hour, but it's cool. We usually go over anyways. We always intend to, but whatever. So I want to talk to you about how you've been working through the grief. We've talked like relatively extensively on like some of the less traditional avenues and paths that you've taken, which I have a lot of interest in myself. You want to talk about that or share a little bit?
Yeah. You know, when the grief starts to happen, you feel just all that comes out is tears, sadness, isolation is a big one, quitting your job, that for me, that kind of thing. You know, you turn to books, but you're too sad to read them. You turn to TV shows and friends and psychiatrists, psychologists. You're just too sad to listen to their essentially basic knowledge and of like, I don't mean basic, but their advice can be very tasteless or boring. Like they don't know what you're going through, you know, like it's not like you're losing your 85-year-old dad or mom. You're losing like, you know, this guy still had 50 more years, you know? To give you more of a context, like Andy was into DMT and stuff like that. He knew how to make it. He experimented with it a few times. He never really did it in a traditional like shamanistic therapeutic setting, psychotherapy. He was also familiar with ayahuasca. He never got to do it. He told me about it. For those people that don't know that are listening, ayahuasca and DMT, they're kind of similar compounds.
There's DMT in ayahuasca.
It's an amazing
it's just with
journey.
With an MAOI inhibitor or monoamine oxidase inhibitor that allows you to process it orally, basically. Which, by the way, the fact that Andy was into that, I've been told by like therapists and treatment providers that it's kind of uncommon for like people that are into you know, your more stigmatized drugs like heroin and other things to also be into psychedelics. So that's another thing like I identify with. It's kind of a kindred spirit in a lot of ways.
I think that's there's so many shades and layers of the pain that people of addiction go through. Like some people just want to get high when they're 15, they smoke weed, then they want to get a little bit higher and they try something else. And you get to a certain level in your 20s, at least for our family, where you want to just experience a deeper psychedelic experience, whether that's taking a tab of acid and walking around the mall, or maybe you just take it and you watch a show, or maybe you take it just to see something different than this boring life and society that we're in this mundane loop. There's opportunities for some, but there's not opportunities for most, but it's this weird fine line of like work really hard, get what you earn and work for, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way. But I think that with DMT and ayahuasca, in my experience, I've tried antidepressants, I've tried certain things, not after the grief, but before it. And I just don't think that it works. I think ayahuasca and DMT work more thoroughly because it allows you to literally see the death in a different way. And I've done it to give you a better perspective too. I went and did it. Andy got out of rehab. I knew he overdosed, gets out of rehab, goes to Orlando, leaves to Daytona. I went and did ayahuasca twice, told Andy about it, told him I'd fly him down here, knew it would help him. I went basically for him because I knew I needed to test this stuff. I wanted to see.
And so that was your motive for it? So this wasn't something that you sought out in your grief?
No.
This was something
before. So January 14th and 15th, I did it. 2 or 3 days later, after trying to tell Andy to come, he dies. So he was so close to coming down and doing it. And, you know, that was my whole thing. And so when you look at the timeline, it's just like, just
Did you do it at the place in Orlando?
No. Down here in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
Yeah, but did it twice. After that, I went to the funeral, immediately went right back for grief, which was helpful. It was good, but the grief is so fresh. It was just such a deep wound. But I like to think that the ayahuasca still did save me because I didn't want to start drinking. I didn't want to go to pornography. I didn't want to quit my job.
Right.
And then after that, someone on my soccer team, they're a shaman, a mom of ours, and she gifted me a DMT session with sassafras, which is kind of like MDMA.
Yeah.
Which helped a lot.
Yeah.
MDA, yeah. So it helped a lot, I think. Shorter journey. I think psilocybin is what I did. It's like 80% ayahuasca. Psilocybin is 20%. I think that was better because it was a longer journey. I could see more emotions and issues and work through them. DMT was more of just like a spectacle, I think. It was gorgeous.
Right.
It's so short.
Psilocybin will make you face it.
Yeah.
You
It's
know
hard
what I
to
mean?
process.
Yeah. If you're harboring something and you eat some mushrooms, those mushrooms are going to be like, ooh, what's this? Let's talk about this right now.
Yeah.
And I've been in that spot. For some people might call it a bad trip, but
Thorough.
definitely going to make you face it and think about it.
Mm-hmm. Did it, so the DMT and the MDA or SAS, that was smoked DMT and
like a ground up powder of the SAS with some orange juice.
Yeah,
You
okay.
just drink that, kicks in 30 minutes, and you just feel very normal. You know, you don't feel messed up.
yeah.
Pupils get big, but you just feel very calm and present. And you're able to talk about the grief without drenching tears. You can just talk about anything.
That's something I've never done. I've never done SAS.
Well, it's very beautiful because you can really talk about your emotions, and then when it's about 2 or 3 hours later, it's time to do the DMT. And you still get a little bit of anxiety because you know how it could be if you traveled, and it's beautiful. But I still always, for me, go back to the ayahuasca or the psilohuasca. I think it's just a thorough experience to grieve, to work on relationships, whatever you're struggling in life. It really does help. It doesn't just I haven't heard too much about bad journeys and stuff. I think if you're just let go, that's the whole point of the whole thing, is just to learn as a human being to let go of control.
That's when it gets bad, is when you try to hold on and
you try to control it rather than ride that wave, and you try to direct the wave. Then it'll probably turn on you a bit.
So the MDA, it's very similar to MDMA.
Okay.
A little more visually, in my experience, a little more visually like active, like a little more psychedelic.
Not as much body, a little more in the head.
And that's probably dependent on dosage, too. But I've heard people say, and like I've never been able to find like anything to like confirm, but it's kind of like speculated that like when you get into some of the higher doses of MDMA and you do start like having visuals, because MDMA does process your liver processes some of it into MDA. That's like the MDA kind of like also kicking in.
I don't think I've ever gotten like crazy visuals from MDMA ever. It's always been body, just that really good rub my head feeling, and scratch my back and rub my head.
But that's what, like MAPS is in their third phase 3 of clinical trials for MDMA, especially for PTSD, because like you're saying, like it allows you to like, that's been my experience, is to be able to like open up and talk about things, even with yourself, like face and consider things and like think about like my own shortcomings without like hating myself, like things that I would just like suppress very deeply and not acknowledge or think about, or certainly not talk about. Like you can face traumatic events or like things that you've like buried without like having that severe negative reaction that people would get otherwise. So how many psilohuasca experiences have you had so far?
Just the 2 before Andy passed, 1 right after, and then 1 recently this past weekend, about a week ago.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
So how does that help you with the grief, and what way has it made it easier for you to grieve?
Good question. I would say it comes back to, with psilohuasca for me, it's a lot of just immense self-love, and when that happens, it's a beautiful combination of the self-love, finally learning to love yourself, telling yourself that you're nice and smart and all these things, believing it, and also appreciating whoever
gratitude
passed.
There it is.
Yeah, whoever passed was. So it's, or is. I don't really say was as much with Andy, but like you're just so happy. You're like, at the same time you're sad he's gone, the absence is gone, but there's this immense opposite too, where it's like, he's my fucking brother. Like, he's not anyone else's.
Absolutely.
And you start to kind of live in that world a little more. And that's where you kind of find peace, because for some people, like me, you're not really religious. You don't really have that thing to lean on. Like, it's going to be okay when I die. I don't know what's going to happen. But with this, it's like, it's just a deeper thing. Like, it's a deeper, present human experience of appreciation of what I have, because we're always going to lack something. We're always going to have something maybe, but that's how it's helped me, just to see the gratitude in it.
No, I love that answer, and I was waiting for you to say gratitude, because like this past week I was in Mexico, and I remember I ate some mushrooms and we watched the sunset, and in moments like that, it's like, man, life is good. You know what I mean? Like, this is, it doesn't get any better than this. I have a good life, you know, just watching that sunset go down on a head full of mushies. And it's just, I've had multiple experiences where, you know, you just sit and meditate while, you know, on mushrooms and just feeling just happy and grateful in that moment. So I can relate, but I mean, not in the sense of your journey, but I get that feeling of being present and being grateful and just, you know, just being okay, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of acceptance that comes with it too.
And for more of a perspective, like in these people in these ceremonies, there's about 15 of us or 10 sometimes. And I was the only one working through grief, and they're all working through, some of them aren't working through shit. They're just there to like see what this is about. And I heard, my friend told me. So, but they're all, the universal agreement is like, they learn to love themselves more and slow down in life more and just take stock of what they have. Learn to be a better listener, stop interrupting. They just learn all these things. And it's really cool because we're always so point A to point B to C to D in life. And when you do something like that, it really does chemically and kind of physiologically just reset your brain and your body, which unfortunately I think we need because of how big of a hole we've dug in society with like the lack of love or the lack of compassion.
We live in a very selfish world these days, for sure, especially with the growth of social media and everything, and you know, getting to see somebody's life on the computer screen and thinking, oh, that my life sucks, you know, but it's all fake. You know, and then I feel for the generation coming up behind us. I feel like they're going to get the worst of that because we grew up in an era where we didn't have, remember dial-up? Yeah. Like we didn't have social media. We didn't have this overflow of information, and 90% of it's false information, and we're looking at people's lives thinking, man, I wish I had their lives. So now we're ungrateful for our own lives. I feel like the ones coming up behind us are gonna really feel that more than we do, I think. And as they grow up, we're probably gonna see I think we've already seen a burst of mental health problems. Because when I was a kid, we never talked about, you know, mental health. I think ADD was pretty much it. But today, it's like mental health is huge.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a massive lack of connection. Like not just like. Actually, like literally we're isolating, you know.
Yeah.
But
even video games, you used to go to your boy's house to play Street Fighter or whatever.
Right.
Now you sit at home and
Yeah.
just connect with somebody that's in a different state. You don't even go, you know, we'd all go to somebody's house. Oh, he's got the new Sega. We're going over there. We're going to play video games. And there'd be a group of us. I got next, you know. And it's definitely a lack of connection and a lot
just yell at each other on Xbox Live and like call each other all sorts of crazy names and stuff, like but there's also like a lack of connectivity, just not literally but in general, like you were saying, like the way social media is, like it's very, I don't know, kind of like masturbatory, but also like behind the scenes very like you know, self-indulgent, and then like kind of hating yourself in a lot of ways, comparing yourself to a lot of people. I think psychedelics can go a long way in kind of like bolstering that connectivity. And just like, I mean, when you have like that quote unquote mystical experience, like you do feel like a oneness with other people in the world.
It's just the universe itself, you know, just feeling grounded and just open to receive whatever the universe or, you know, God or whatever it is that that you look up to, just opening up to that and just feeling more connected with it. It's hard to explain to somebody who's never done mushrooms, that feeling.
No, it's
but
close to impossible.
Yeah, it's there's nothing like it, man.
You're just connected to the universe.
Yeah.
You're just connected to the planet. Everything. You're a part of it. You're not just like the human running the show, controlling the world to make it go around with money and stuff. It's like,
and it also helps you to see that you're just a speck in the universe, not in a bad way, but that there's so much more in this universe than we can physically see or feel, you know.
Yeah, and that, I think the overwhelming gap of knowledge, or you can't comprehend certain things. It's daunting, but kind of with ayahuasca or anything, the more self-love that you can obtain, which is very hard to do, frankly, without psychedelics. You might do your hobbies and stuff, but until you do something like this and really let go, you can finally learn to love yourself, which in then turn you can love other people, take care of things around you. It's a beautiful cycle, just like the suffering from addiction is the negative cycle. They kind of go hand in hand. You can't really fix the body without fixing the mind, or
where the head goes, the body follows.
Yeah,
yep.
I mean, just because someone's going to get drugs for the 13,000th time, they don't fucking want to. Like they don't want to do that. I mean, that's why I would say at Andy's funeral, like they're not happy.
Yeah,
they might feel good for a minute, but they're not like happy all the time.
Yeah, I've heard people say, like, especially people in recovery. Specifically like abstinence-based 12-step recovery, that the use of psychedelics is like a shortcut. It's like cheating yourself of the spiritual experience that you can attain, like, quote unquote, naturally, which I don't particularly see that as being unnatural. But so, like, yeah, like, it's difficult and time consuming, but like some of these states and like the benefits can be gained through like meditation and like serious self-seeking, I think. But when there are those tools, like I've heard, I want to say it was like Ram Dass, who told a story where there was like a yogi and his student, and the student's like swimming every day, swimming to like eventually reach this island out there. And every day he's like swimming a little closer, would swim back. And then the yogi like comes to him and he's like, why are you doing this? And he's like, well, if I swim enough, I can reach this island. And then he's like, well, why swim when you have a boat? And there's like a boat right by him. You know, I probably butchered it a little bit, but like that's the psychedelic experience can be that boat. Like, yes, like there is stuff to be gained from meditation and like serious self-seeking, but like when some of that can be accomplished, like they're finding like years of therapy within 1 or 2 sessions of this or that, why not utilize it, you know?
Try meditating on mushrooms, see what you find.
Yeah. And it's not for everybody. It's not like some people do have like psychotic breaks, and if you're predisposed to, you know, schizophrenia, whether it's in your family or you have had other, you know, psychosis like symptoms, then it might be best to avoid. But I think it should be talked about more, and I think it should be more freely available and understood. That's the thing, like we had so many years that were like wasted after the Controlled Substances Act. Like all of these things were being studied pretty heavily in the 1970s, just put the nix on it, and then there was nothing for like 20 years. I think it was like Rick Strassman was the first one to be able to study it again with DMT, like in the 90s. And then obviously things have started to pick up again, but to imagine like what we lost in that time. But it's available. So
it is very, very available in multiple countries. It's people are waking up, and there's studies done on it now too. And I think, not to say one thing for or against governments, because they help and hurt people in different ways, but you can't always just rely on the government to provide that for you. You have to maybe seek it out on your own. It's like religion or something like that. Like you have to seek that out.
I would definitely like to know more about.
I would share more with you guys.
We'll talk after the show.
So before we wrap up, I'm just curious. Have you dreamed about Andy? Have you had dreams where he was there?
I don't think so yet. I haven't, but I will say after this last session I had last week, especially right after and even today, his face is more vivid when I think about him now. It's really odd. It's very real though. Like, more, and I mean like really, like I can see his skin tone, and it's just deeper. It's a deeper color. So it's, you know, you connect more with them. And I think the further along in grief you get, the more stuff comes up. And when you let it come up, another thing will come up. It's like these little buoys that just keep popping up all over, and it's really cool. It's not all sad. It's been 6 months. It's been a long 6 months. I didn't feel, I mean, his birthday passed and stuff, and that was rough, but it wasn't as like rough as I thought it would be. You know, I used it in a way. Obviously, I was sad, but I use it to celebrate like who he was, or if something comes up that reminds me of Andy, I laugh about it.
You can definitely see that the healing that you've
Yeah.
acquired so far.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
It definitely
it feels weird to share too. I've shared with my parents, and certain people in my family aren't into what I've tried.
Sure.
But I feel like I'm at least a vessel
Naturally.
to at least go try it and come back and share. Just like what someone might share with religion, they'll share it with me. I've learned a lot from religion, how to treat people, but hopefully I can share more about this to help people too. So.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I look
Good
forward to
Yeah,
seeing
absolutely.
like where you
Yeah.
go from here,
Thank you.
and maybe kind of getting your help with some things too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right
I'd love
on.
to. Yeah.
I very much appreciate you
Of
coming
course.
on and
Yeah, thank
being
you.
so open.
Come back
and
anytime. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
have to have you back
For sure, man.
Get some
I
updates and
I
stuff.
definitely would like to know more about some of your journey as you
Absolutely.
continue on with it.
Of
So
course.
maybe we'll talk again about some more breakthroughs that you had.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
For
thank you,
sure.
guys.
All right,
Yeah,
cool,
absolutely.
man. Anything else?
I would say if you're in a situation like this, whether you're a sibling, mother, father, it does get better, but you can't rely on alcohol. You can't rely on, and this is just my opinion, you can't rely on antidepressants. You really have to push further than you think you need to push. And whether that's going to the gym more, trying something like this, just trying something new, sculpting, whatever, pottery, like you can't just keep living your life because
Can't just sit in it.
you can't like it'll literally eat you alive. It'll
Yeah.
age you, like physically it'll age you. I would say, yeah. So it's just like anything else. You break your foot, like you might rest it for a while, but you can't just sit on the couch for
Right.
10 years. You're going to atrophy and just die.
Mhm.
So I would say just keep fighting, keep reaching out, because the more you share, like I'm sharing, you reach people that you never dream. I've never would have dreamed I'd be sitting here right now, like sharing my brother's story with you. So
Yeah.
yeah, it means a lot that you guys can listen. And
Oh, it
be
means
here
a lot
for
that
me.
you
Yeah.
share it with
Yeah,
us.
bro,
Yeah,
for
thank you.
sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you guys.
All right, thank you, man.
Yep.